All right, so let's talk about the third type of tissue. We've talked about epithelial, we've talked about muscle. Now let's talk about nervous. There are two major cell populations in nervous tissue. The neurons, that are specialized cells that basically receive and then conduct stimuli. So they're the communication lines in your body. And those are the neurons. And then you've got those cells that are in charge of taking care of those neurons. Those are called the neuroglia cells, okay? These are specialized cells that protect, support, and insulate the more delicate neurons. The thing about the neuroglial cells is, or I guess I shouldn't say that, the thing about the neurons is we have to have them for communication between different parts of our body. If we damage them, then we no longer have them. So having a specific subset of cells whose job it is to basically just to make sure those cells are okay is very beneficial. So looking at a pretty hand-drawn picture, this is a classic neuron, kind of looks like a palm tree. Okay, so you have this big portion up here at the top. Okay, this, give me 1 second, is called the cell body. Or, because we're science and we have to be complicated, the soma. Okay, it's pretty much where you're going to find the nucleus, you're going to find the endoplasmic reticulum. This is where you're going to find the important bits of the cell. As well as that, you also have these guys right here, these short extensions coming off of that cell body, okay? These short extensions are called dendrites. Dendrite is, I believe in Latin, the meaning for the word tree. So if you were to cut that off right there, it kind of looks like a trunk with branches. So that makes sense, all right? So you've got the dendrites, you've got the cell body, you've got the nucleus, and you can see that little dense body there, which is the nucleolus. As you come off of this cell body, I'm going to erase all this. As you come off of this cell body, you'll notice that there's kind of this narrowing area here, kind of looks like an ice cream cone. This is actually called the axon hillock and the initial segment. So notice that all of these extensions up here are very, very short. They're kind of, they're just there and that's it. But this guy down here is huge and long. The longest extension, and there is only one coming off of a neuron, is called the axon. Okay? Dendrites, these guys, these short little dudes, are normally for incoming information. Then, as that signal goes down through the axon hillock to the initial segment, it goes out through the axon. The axon carries the signal away from the neuron, basically to its next destination, wherever that may happen to be. Now, these little dudes here that look like purple tamales, these little guys are actually part of the neuroglial cells. Those neuroglia that I was talking about earlier, these actually kind of act in the same way that an ACE bandage would if you sprain your foot. Physically, it supports the limb when you sprain your foot, right? Well, think about this. This is one single cell, and I'm taking it, and on this axon, I'm stretching this out. Can you imagine the thinnest spider web you've ever seen and then divide it by like 10,000? And that's how thin this axon actually is. So having ACE bandages wrap around it to give it physical support is not a bad idea. All right? It actually, like I said about the neuroglia before, their job is to take care of these cells. Well, these Schwann cells that are making the purple tamales are actually doing that. physically they're supporting them so that they don't end up being damaged if you bend your arm or you bend your leg. So looking at the slides, this is a multipolar neuron. So basically what you're looking at here, let me erase all this, is a close-up of this. Okay, so you're looking up close and personal at that. So you've got this multipolar neuron, also known as a motor neuron. You can see, believe it or not, that this and this are the same picture. It's just that this picture is from far away and this picture I have zoomed in. So looking at this picture, you can see the long extension coming off of the cell, the soma, the cell body. In that case, that's the axon. Neurons only have one axon, period, end of story. So if you can see where that long extension is, you know that's the axon. From this picture here, you don't know because I haven't given you enough information. So for what you can see in this picture, your thinking should be all of them are dendrites because I haven't shown you which one is the long extension coming off of it. Okay? Where this meets, I'm going to go back so that I can move that. Where this meets up with the cell body, just like in this picture, where the cell body meets up with the axon, this is going to be the axon hillock. This is going to be where they meet up. Now, taking a look at the zoomed picture, you've got the cell body, right? And technically, I can still point that out over here. That is still the cell body. You have the dendrites, these short extensions coming off of the cell, which again, you can still see over here. You can still see these short extensions coming off of this cell body. It's not like you can't, okay? Now, look at all of these dark circles. Every time that we've seen dark circles, we know that these are nuclei. In every other picture that we've seen, these are actually the glial cell nuclei, the cells that are taking care of this guy, because those Schwann cells that I showed you aren't the only type of glial cells. So these little dudes here are the nuclei of cells that are taking care of my neuron. You've got the nucleus and you've got the nucleolus, that dense body that's dead center in the middle there that you can't miss because its color is so much darker than the nucleus. So that is the one slide that I want you to know for the nervous tissue. When we get to the later chapters, when we're actually looking at the nervous system, you'll have to know more slides. But for right now, this is the only one I'm asking you to know for nervous tissue. What type of tissue is this? It's nervous. Identify the slide. You can put motor neuron, you can put multipolar neuron, because either one is correct. Where would you find it? The brain, the spinal cord, either one works. And then identify A, identify B, identify C, identify D, identify E. So technically with this one picture, I can ask you 8 questions. With this one, I can also ask you, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Because I can ask you about the dendrites, I can ask you about the nucleus, I can ask you about the axon hillock, I can ask you about the axon, actually, and I can ask you about the glial cells. So there is the possibility for me to ask you multiple questions here. The next lecture, we're going to talk about the connective tissue, the last tissue in the histology section.